All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to begin. Thanks again for being with us today. Welcome to the Lubar Center, Eckstein Hall, Marquette University Law School. I'm Mike Goucher, and this is On the Issues. This is our continuing series of conversations with news and policymakers, people who are doing interesting and important work in this region and beyond. Today, we're going to be talking about building community in Milwaukee, about investing in neighborhoods that have for too long been ignored or neglected. And we're going to talk to three women who are, in many respects, game changers in that sense. They are building community in the city of Milwaukee. Let me introduce our guest to you right now. Seated next to me is Melissa Goins. Melissa is Vice President of J. Jeffers and Company and President of Maures Development. Next to Melissa is JoAnne Sabir. She is co-owner of The Juice Kitchen and co-owner of Freedom Endeavors and involved in lots of interesting projects at this moment. And the same can be said for Juli Kaufmann, who is the president of Fix Development and is also going to be talking about some of the exciting work that's going on in our community right now. Won't you please give them a warm welcome to Marquette University Law School. So the people next to me are entrepreneurs and developers, but I want to begin by having you describe what it is you do. Melissa Goins, we'll go right down the list here. How would you describe
I guess
your
I
work?
pull up the short straw today.
You get to go first, that's right.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for having me, having us, and thank you for being here to listen to us for a good hour of conversation. If I had to think about my work, I definitely would delete any affiliation with any company. And I would think about the passion and the joy that comes out of the work that I do. So everything I do really starts as an idea, and then my work ethic kicks in, and then this magic happens. And so to me, it really is creating beauty where there isn't any. And that's how I would describe the work that I do in Milwaukee and around Wisconsin.
JoAnne?
I love it. So I'm going to keep the joy thread going. I would say that my work really rests in being responsive to the calls from neighbors, from all who live, work, and serve in my community, and allowing the response to be a part of my honoring of all who live, work, and serve here. So there's a significant amount of joy that comes when you see a project come into fruition. If it's pathways into the economy, if it's redeveloping main streets, it's really been a legacy that was given to me of being able to respond to the needs of neighbors. So when we really get into that, it looks like creating businesses. It looks like developing the Sherman Phoenix, which we'll get into, but it really has been 20 years of responding has been my work in community.
Juli?
The thread I think that weaves all of us together, and the way I often talk about my work, is that I use real estate as a tool for social change. And I'm very motivated. You know, historically I've had a passion and continue to have a passion around environmental impact. But I'm really focused not globally, I'm focused on that locally. And when you think about creating a healthy planet, there's no healthy planet without healthy people. And so social equity is really also a fundamental tenet of using real estate for that change process. And I love to partner because I think that the strength of our work is really when we come together in relationship. And the other thing I'd say about our work is that we really think about everything we do as relational and not transactional. So we're really about building a bigger, more inclusive, and amazing family here in Milwaukee together.
So it's not just bottom line, it's social impact. That's a large part of it.
Absolutely. There are times when we don't profit as much as we could.
I mean, bottom line isn't bad.
Preferably a black bottom line is ideal. But we are for-profit businesses, and what we do is in part to financially gain from it, but there are times when the community good really is our priority and we sacrifice that profit line in order to make a better product or invest more into people.
But I would say also it is about sharing that economics more equitably, and I actually have seen, I know there are more than you, but there are 3 people in the audience today I've already noted who are investors in my real estate, and these aren't accredited, deep, wealthy individuals. They're just average Milwaukeeans who have said, I'd like to join you in making real estate a tool for social change. And so one of the models we use is making it more accessible at every level for tenants, for people who might not be able to get involved in the building trades, to make that more open process, but also as owners, to let average Milwaukeeans take a piece of a building on their main street and own it, so that if there's a return on that real estate, it goes back to them and in their own community. And so it is profitability that's shared.
I think it's important when a lot of my language is heart speak, but it's really important to be grounded in the numbers, that the goal is to really create opportunities that cash flow and that can be translated to pathways into the economy for our neighbors. So part of what I do and I'm doing is creating businesses that ultimately our employees will be owners. So while it feels really good to create community and to speak about galvanizing a movement that brings us beyond theoretical conversations around how do we engage, how do we disembark from segregation, it really becomes an active opportunity to create businesses that facilitate spaces that allow us to come together and that cash flow. So it feels good, but there's also this piece of pathways into the economy that's critical.
Let's talk a little bit about projects you have done to this point, because later on we're going to be talking about some things that are currently in the mix that are very exciting. But I want people in this room to get a sense of the things that you've done in the past. JoAnne, I'll begin with you. I mean, you've talked about what comes with starting new businesses. You and your husband started a business in the Lindsay Heights neighborhood, the Juice Kitchen.
Absolutely. My husband and I started a business. We've been in business for roughly 7 years, 3 years bricks and mortar. And we are set to net $500,000 this year. So the goal.
What's the business?
What is it? But I'm talking money first, because generally my heart speaks about the joy of resting in a community that called us to be there. But I think it's really important also, again, and this is me putting on my Melissa and Juli hat, getting into the numbers and how that matters. Because we were called to be in a neighborhood where folks didn't think we would thrive, where people didn't imagine that there was a desire for a healthy offering. So what is the Juice Kitchen? The Juice Kitchen provides healthy fruit, healthy meals, healthy juices. So we have an array of stuff that really, really tastes good. We see about 500 people a day from everywhere. So you may have the attorney around the corner from North and 17th Street, the CEO from Bayview. We just have an expansive.
This is at 16th and North,
This is
JoAnne?
16th and North, so 1617 West North Avenue. A lot of people use Jake's as the marker. So that's how we get folks to
These are kind of different food
completely
offerings,
different. Come get your juice, get a sandwich, balance. I believe in it. I believe in balance. And so the Juice Kitchen was our first endeavor, and we really, I worked as a part of a nonprofit organization called Walnut Way that my mom and father founded. And so this work in the Juice Kitchen was really an extension of that legacy around being able to listen to neighbors and be responsive. So our response was, what do we want in neighborhoods? We want something that exists in all well-thriving communities. We want access. And so the Juice Kitchen became our first entree into being able to respond in a physical form. And Juli, segue, our tie-in, was hired on. We were impressed by her work as our developer to develop what is now the Innovations and Wellness Commons. It houses the Juice Kitchen. And so here we are at the Juice Kitchen, and now we're transitioning from the Juice Kitchen, but so much has, and looking at all these relationships that I see in the audience, has really formed as a result of that small footprint.
Mm-hmm. Juli, tell us a little bit about a couple of your projects. I think of Tandem over on Fond du Lac Avenue. Tell us a little bit about that.
The Tandem restaurant, who's been there? Right on, that's amazing.
Georgia Fried Chicken.
The Tandem is an offering that many of you know about. It's at 18th and Fond du Lac. But that really is the story of how a community rises up together through a piece of real estate. And so the Tandem restaurant was created within what was formerly a foreclosed commercial property on a commercial corridor that is more than 50% vacant. So we worked with the city of Milwaukee to acquire that foreclosure. I partnered with a neighborhood resident. You might hear a lot about our 53206 zip code in Milwaukee. Well, this partner comes from that zip code with amazing talents and skills, and together we co-developed a piece of real estate, a resident who brought all kinds of credibility and connections. And that piece of real estate has almost 50 co-owners, like I mentioned before. More than a third live in that Lindsay Heights neighborhood, and I saw 3 who are in the audience today who are from across the community who are investors with a minimum of $1,000. They co-own that building. And in that building are 8 small businesses, actually, primarily women and people of color who are the owners of those small businesses. And the tandem is a restaurant that is responsive to the community. It's a community with Jake being the exception, Jake's. Has no sit-down restaurants, certainly not for dinner, over on the weekend, and they have brought an offering that's really responsive to the community, and so much more because they're embedded in and committed to the Lindsay Heights neighborhood. Most of their hires are from local residents who sometimes have never had a job, might have a history that makes it more difficult for them to be successful in their jobs, but they've really embraced, frankly, something that JoAnne has shepherded for us and taught us, which is embracing wellness in the whole person when you think about employment. And so we think about all the things that will make that person successful, not just an alarm clock or learning how to show up on time, but how to be loved and how to love yourself and how to really access those parts of your wellness to be an effective employee. And a challenge at the tandem is they're so successful at it that there's a pipeline out. So a lot of employees have moved on to other jobs in the hospitality industry, but it's an example of blending community responsiveness in a piece of real estate, and we hope it will lead to more on the same block.
Melissa, give us an example of a project that you've done that you're particularly proud of. It's made a difference.
Oh,
you feel
geez.
it's made a difference.
Probably my most recent transaction, and so to give a little context to the work that I've undertaken the last 12 years, I am by trade, I guess, a real estate developer, and during the last 12 years, I've invested $75 million into the city of Milwaukee through investor equity, grants, and just traditional debt. In my portfolio is just about 400 apartment units, varying between 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, serving low income but also market rate folks. And in terms of commercial space, I believe we have somewhere in the realm of 20,000 square feet of commercial space, square feet in our portfolio. In terms of picking a favorite, it's kind of like I'm a mother. You
I know,
can't
it's hard.
choose.
It's hard, I understand.
So those 75 million are reflected in 9 different transactions. I'll talk about the most recent one, which is the Mill Road Library redevelopment. So the city of Milwaukee's public library system went through a planning process to redo several of its libraries. And several years ago, my firm was selected to be the redeveloper of the Mill Road Library transaction. So we've successfully got the funding for that to relocate to 76 in Good Hope. So that'll house an 18,000 square foot 21st century library that really embraces technology, and we combined it with 65 units of apartments. And so that's just one.
Yeah.
That's one of my little
So through these experiences, clearly you know what works in development in communities and what doesn't. What are the lessons of these successful experiences you've had?
Yikes.
I think for me, there's just so much brilliance here, and there's the power of the collective. And so when I think about what works, I will look at these two. And
Is that
really,
a toss?
no, I'm not tossing. I'm really affirming that a lot of times we try to go forth with our own abilities, and that there's just the magnitude of what's possible increases when there's a collective and wealth of brilliance that's afforded to you. So for me, along this journey has just been, and I look at community as that source of strength. I look at the legacy that they both created provides an underpinning of strength. It informs. So when we talk about this mentorship and what's next, I think that always curating the abilities of others and then allowing for that support system. I think that's critically important because, again, there's this notion of amplification. We can do $75 million worth of transactions, but how do we amplify that? We can build one Sherman Phoenix, but how do we amplify that? And so when I look at, I consider both of these beautiful women, my dear friends, but also really mentors. So my work and my legacy really came from community advocacy and community redevelopment work, but have been nurtured into the possibility and now stand with the understanding of how significant redeveloping main streets and digging into the development in communities. So for me, when I think about what works, it's really this extending the legacy and mentorship and cultivating and amplifying the possibilities of what's next.
And collaboration, our current project has 29 tenants, all because of relationships that my partner JoAnne has. So there's so much power. Yes, real estate experience and development experience matters, but to not, what works is to listen to, listening, collaborating, and creating relationships and not looking in traditional places. I will tell you, in our experience, mine in particular, something that does not work a lot of times, traditional real estate systems and traditional financial systems do not work in communities of color and disinvested neighborhoods. They are not working. And
why not, Julie?
well, you know,
Priorities are different.
there's a lot of
Cost of debt.
what we can talk about in terms of access to capital, in terms of historical legacy of racism in the city, but there are just some very fundamental things. You have a financial sector that bases their willingness to lend not only on whether I have wealth already, which most of us don't if we're doing work in this situation, or they base it on what the property can be valued at. Well, the property can't be appraised at a certain level because it's been deteriorated so long because it's had an absentee landlord. And I can't get enough rent in a certain neighborhood to get it to appraise up at a higher level because that's not the market rate. So there are tons of sort of mechanisms we could go on and on about that are structurally defined in our financial system that create a barrier to success. And then you layer on top of that racism and financial challenges and lack of access to capital. And it's, you know, I'm in awe every day of the work that my partner has accomplished because it's not just getting real estate done, it's getting over all of those atypical barriers that are necessary.
I would say that a lot of folks, it's been a journey of convincing people to do things differently because people are entrenched and this is how it has to happen. Philanthropy cannot mix with investors. This is how it has to happen. So we begin to see philanthropy in a traditional way and we still are suffering for all the same ills. So there's an ability for us to collectively trust innovation. If we know that what we've been doing or what we've been giving to isn't reaping the results and we're all still, you know, homeless and suffering, then there's an opportunity to lean into innovation, something that might not be standard mode of operation. But that's been a critical part of the momentum is leaning into developments on Center Street, leaning into developments on North and Fourth Avenue, really leaning into innovation and how we also use philanthropy just a little bit differently.
Yeah, I would say in very layman terms that the system it sucks. The way that society has been structured for many, many hundreds of years is just not set up for the masses to be successful. And I think some of it is embedded into human nature. We have this tribalism about ourselves. We have this competitive nature about ourselves. And in order for change to really happen, we individually have to look at ourselves and say, okay, how can I make something different? And so a lot of what I do is about relationships because you have to nurture a relationship in order for somebody to believe in an idea, in order to bring the collaborative partners together in order to be successful. And so lessons learned, there are so many.
Take more vacations, but we can't.
Yeah, that's a part of it. Self-care for sure is definitely a lesson, however you define it for yourself. But I think about doing too much. I definitely am somebody who is active and has a lot of things going, and deals have not proceeded because I had just too much going on. That's more of a personal lesson. I think about politics. There are so many lessons in the realm of satisfying people's desires and requirements. You just name it. I mean, Julie and JoAnne have touched on a bunch, but.
I want to ask you about the very real challenge of funding the projects that you want to do and that you feel need to be done. You've had to do some non-traditional things, crowdfunding. Some people here obviously know what crowdfunding is, some people don't. Tell us a little bit about that. What have you had to do to get funding for some of these projects?
Because there is not availability of traditional capital for most of the work I do, it requires blending of a crowd of investors. And so it marries some traditional, what you consider angel investors who have accreditation and have access to greater wealth, but mostly it's a pool of a lot of small people. So all my deals have more than 50 people in them, and that's an innovation to just get around the fact that I don't bring my personal capital, I don't have a company that brings capital, and I don't have leverage of capital. That's one way. Another very challenging way we've innovated is around the idea that philanthropy can be invested with for-profit. And we have heard from many over time who resist that idea, saying that there's a fundamental illegality to it, we've heard, that it's philosophically not congruent with what they've always felt made sense. And first of all, it is legal to do, and you can structure deals for that to happen. But more importantly, our belief is that economic development in the neighborhoods we work in my view, is not working we still have the depth of issues that we have because we're not moving the needle fast enough. Why are we willing to wait a generation for a Main Street to stay?
And it's not just economic development, it's the school system, it's so many different layers of society.
So I think trying to bring to bear new strategies with, everything comes down to the money. And it's figuring out ways to not stay in a traditional silo of the nonprofit sector will fix all the problems in places that have problems to fix. And it's not for-profits that will solve all the problems. It's figuring out ways to bring all the strengths of each together in a way, innovatively, to places that aren't seeing change happen.
Yeah, and I think on my end, we tend to leverage the CRA requirements of the federal government on investors and lenders to really get the equity and the debt that we need for our transactions. So instead of trying to bore you with this, if you think about a real estate development as like your household income, if you don't have the money to pay the bills, then something has to come in and help subsidize or support it some way, somehow, whether that's your cousin, which could be some tax credits, or your auntie, which may be a grant. And so the trick with urban renewal is typically the income that's generated by the transaction is not enough to justify the cost of doing the work. So then the gap has to be filled in some shape, form, or fashion, and housing credits, historic credits, and a bunch of credits, these tax credits is what we do to leverage the funds needed to do our transactions, including city subsidies, other state subsidies, and then grant money from those who are willing to give it.
So you got to tap a lot of different resources.
And tap dance.
And relationships.
And timing matters. I think the last deal I did on 4th and North Avenue between two buildings had 14 distinct funding sources.
Yep.
That is a headache.
Yep.
You see all this gray hair in the audience? Okay, I've gained it in a figurative sense.
Let's talk about your current projects, because there's a lot to discuss here. Some of you are familiar with them, and JoAnne mentioned the Sherman Phoenix project. Let's spend a couple minutes on that. This is something that JoAnne and Juli are developing, although I understand, Melissa, you're an investor in that too.
Hi, guys.
So let's go back a couple of years. We remember the unrest in Sherman Park, and we remember a bank branch that burned during the unrest. The two of you decided we need to do something here. So tell us how that decision was made, why you thought it was a good decision, and what ultimately the goal is.
So much spontaneous overflowing of how this really happened. My husband and I were on the front page of the New York Times, and Juli called me. Oh, you're on the front page. And so she's like, we have to do something, we have to do something, we have to do something in Sherman Park. Do you want to do something? Yes. In the article, our alderman, Rainey, said, the Phoenix will rise, and we need businesses like the Juice Kitchen to come into Sherman Park. So the answer, without even thinking about a market analysis, was yes, let's do it. We need to be there. And so from there, Juli tweeted, we need a space.
This is all because of Twitter, everybody.
This is all.
And the New York Times.
One of the few pleasant things that comes from Twitter based on my own personal experience, but go ahead.
One of the few Twitter gifts. And so from there, a now colleague responded to Juli's tweet to say, I'm coming to get you. Juli didn't really know him. He came to her house, picked her up.
On a Sunday.
On a Sunday. And the building that he shared was the former BMO Harris Bank on 35th and Fond du Lac. So of course, it's a 20,000 square foot building, which is bigger than what a 500 square foot juice kitchen would be able to nurture.
So you thought.
So we thought. And 29 tenants later, we are set to launch. being really creative in terms of our funding structure, our capital stack. We are here, we are close to here, and we will be launching November 30th. So.
I think an important element of the story is that we did not put out a financial strategy that said if you put 29 tenants in a building at 35th and Fond du Lac, that will work. We were like, holy crap, we need more than one business for this to work. And we initially came up with 12, we're thinking 12 businesses would be what we could do, and that was overwhelming. And ultimately, the reason we have 29 tenants is because there was incredible overflow of response. There is so much brilliance in all of our neighborhoods. There are so many entrepreneurs who simply want what all entrepreneurs want, someone to listen to their idea, give them their shot, and create some access to capital. And then don't be a jerk landlord and give them some good quality space. The bar is not low, it's the same as everywhere, but there just aren't as many opportunities in where we were looking. And so we kept getting, JoAnne's phone has probably got 5 million texts on it right now because do you have any more space? Is there more room? And we carved out every possible safe in the lower basement corner is going to be a massage therapist because there is so much excess demand. I think it's just important to tell the story that we know it's going to be successful because it's not transactional, it's relationship built, and that every one of those 29 tenants believes in what all you believe in. That's why you're here. You care about the city. You care about these neighborhoods, and you want to do something. So you're maybe one of those 50 investors who said, I don't have 50,000 to give you, but I've got 1,000. Count me in. I want to be an owner. You're one of those 29 tenants who said, I want space, I want to take a chance, and I want to be in a building where there are people like me who are going to be selling our goods and services, Black-owned businesses. This city does not have enough celebration of that. And so we've seen so much response to this beautiful, beautiful opportunity. And it's been willingness of people to say, you told us your budget was $2 million. Now why is it $2.5 million? Well, then you said it was $3 million. Now why is it $3.5 million? And there's a lot of judgment and skepticism. Did you not do your budget right? Did you screw up? I mean, you have to have some faith and openness to say it's really just because we kept wanting to respond, and it costs more. When you start with one business and end up with 29 businesses, it just costs more. So being responsive and evolutionary in your thinking is really important to being successful, but it's incredibly hard.
JoAnne, tell us a bit about the kinds of businesses, the tenants. Who are they?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a spectrum. There are businesses that are opening their third location here because they couldn't imagine this endeavor happening without them. So we have the Purple Doors of the world that will be moving in.
Ice cream.
Ice cream, yes, to ground us in ice cream.
They're down in Walker's Point, some of you know that.
And in the grocery stores.
Yeah,
And the grocery
stores,
stores.
that's true, yeah.
So this is a venture that Julie initially nurtured and is in one of her buildings. And so now they'll be in this next iteration of Julie's work and my work. So we have, it ranges from, you can do everything. You can live here. You can get a massage, get your hair cut, get your makeup done, eat
Nails,
pizza,
pedicure.
go to yoga. You can
Martial
have
arts, get some
martial
coffee.
art, get some coffee, plug, pizza, another plug.
Vegan restaurant, buffalo wings, organic.
Beautiful. I mean, imagine this is not just space, that's rentable space, it's curated. So in my mind, I always say this over and over again. I know Alvin Ailey is going to come perform. I see Judith Jameson is in the space. Film festival, we'll have maybe film screenings, but really a lived-in opportunity for all of us.
I have to ask you one other question about investors, because it's been fascinating to watch as the cost is, as you describe, I don't know what
Evolved.
it is now. Is it 3.5? Is that probably in that?
Four,
Okay.
plus we need 200,000 more.
Okay. So I do understand that. I mean, people do remember the Art Museum's edition, the Calatrava. I don't think it ended up being built for what was originally quoted.
Thank you.
They only high five. They only have one tenant.
High five.
But you do have interesting investors. I mean, you've got people who are angel investors in this community, business people. You have professional football players.
Absolutely.
I mean, tell us a little bit about it. It's an interesting group of folks who've decided to get behind this.
They've rallied to meet us where we are. So this rally has been tremendous. Although with the pushback, there's been a rally. Every time the budget increases marginally by about 250,000, there's a rally of folks to meet us. So definitely has been about relationships and people who trust us beyond, I believe,
Anybody
what their
here want to raise
own
their hand if they're involved
understanding
in the
is.
Yeah.
The investors in the building?
Yeah.
Hello.
Back here.
Hello.
Welcome. Hey.
Welcome.
Hi, Sarah. Good to see you back there.
And so,
You know, we have Mary who lives on the block. And she came and said, I'd like to invest for me and for my daughter, $2,000.
And my grandson.
Oh, yeah, $3,000. We've got a $100,000 investor who's recently sold his company and retired and really wanted to give. So he gave $100,000 as an investor and $100,000 as a donor. And it's all walks of life. Melissa is an investor. So it's really philanthropists who've really stepped up and said, I don't need to take an ownership stake, but I'd like to donate to the project. So we've done an Indiegogo crowd donation campaign where we have people who've given $20 to get a free juice and say they've donated, to people who've given $400,000, former retired football players. You know, the athletes have really stepped up. We've had a number of athletes really involved because they are looking for positive pathways to give back to Milwaukee, where they're from, and
It's
really have impact.
interesting to see DeAndre Levy, who you know, some people may remember this. He played at the University of Wisconsin, linebacker, had a good NFL career, Vincent High School grad. Again, it's people who have some connection to this community and want good things to happen here. Very interesting.
it has to belong to all of us. So
Yeah.
it's that sense of belonging that is really engaging.
Yeah.
So November 30th is the open, and you're going to open another restaurant. Is this true? Two more restaurants.
Talk about doing too much.
So you've got
Yeah.
That's great.
Shindig and then a
A
pizza
shindig,
place.
and then we're partnering with Giacomo Faluca at Palermo's to open Sauce and Spice, a pizza place. And so again, the model is that this is not mine, that I'm in this to ensure that there's a sound infrastructure that ultimately transfers to, we've already have the owners in sight, to owners that are working, and we're nurturing them into ownership. So I will own with my husband Shindig Cafe. And that was advanced in partnership with Paul from Collectivo, one of the owners, and then again, Sauce and Spice.
Let me spend some time with Melissa on a couple of recent projects that she's been involved with. And so those of you familiar with the Bronzeville neighborhood in Milwaukee, this was a once very vibrant neighborhood that probably suffered because of the freeway expansion that went north.
Probably.
I-43. Well, more than, okay. But right now, you've got a couple of, I don't know, they're sort of catalytic projects. You took the old Garfield School, which had been sitting empty for a long time, and you turned that into apartments. You created new apartments. This we're talking about near King Drive and North Avenue, in that area. You did the Griot apartments, and now you're doing something that's been, I think, very important to this community over years, but it shut down. The Black Holocaust Museum is all a part of that. So tell us about what you hope comes from that development, what you've done in that community.
I'm sure JoAnne will have some fill-in-the-blank language for me, but I will start. Because I have these ideas and these visions and these like spiritual moments that drive me into action. And so a lot of times it's less about words and more about manifesting things into reality. And so the whole premise behind me even getting to real estate development was about leveraging bricks and mortar to bring pride and hope to people, point blank, end of sentence with a period. And that's what my portfolio and my work and my energy and my effort has gone into doing. And so when we talk specifically about the historic Garfield redevelopment at North Avenue and now North Villar Phillips Avenue, which is previously 4th Street, it was about really thinking about Bronzeville. So Bronzeville is North Avenue between King Drive and I-43 North. It really is a homage to what was Walnut Street, which was on Walnut Street, roughly King Drive to, again, well, Fond du Lac in probably that case, which Walnut Street was the place, the central place for African Americans in Milwaukee. The freeway was proposed, demolished all kind of businesses, displaced families. Businesses were not able to come back from that. Home ownership was not able to come back from that. And so Bronzeville is that present day Walnut Street tribute. I just saw one of my colleagues. Hey. Just threw me off. And so doing the transaction at Villar Phillips Avenue and North Avenue really was more than just, again, the bricks and mortar piece, bringing pride and hope to people, but this time I had the opportunity to support an institution that was, in this year, celebrated 30 years. So the America's Black Holocaust Museum was founded 30 years by Dr. James Cameron, who is one of the few known survivors of a lynching. So it was in Marion, Indiana, early 1900s, a Beitler photograph, which is very popular. 2 black men hung from a tree, and there was one noose that did not have a body in it, and that body was Dr. Cameron. Through a long story, he ended up in Milwaukee. He started this museum, and 2 years after his death, so he passed away in 2006, 2008, the museum closed. And so for 10 years, we've been out this piece of history, this piece of legacy, but there was always this group of people who never gave up hope that the museum could come back. And so when I heard about that, it was like, God said, the ancestors said, oh, that's your job, get to work. And so it took 5 years. So if the museum has been closed 10 years this year, and I've been working on it for 5 years, it's been a process. And so when you tie all these pieces together, the Garfield School has also been closed for a long time. It was built in 1887, and it remained a school until it closed in the early 2000s. That piece of real estate ultimately went back into the ownership of the city of Milwaukee. The piece of real estate owned by the museum, which was literally right next door, went into the hands of the city of Milwaukee. And then there was an old restaurant, previously gas station, that also went back into the hands of the city of Milwaukee. So you have this Bronzeville Cultural District. You have these 3 adjacent properties. The city put out this RFP. For me, I had the magic piece of the puzzle, and that was how do we manifest the museum back into a physical space? And so, in June of this year, we celebrated with Danny Glover coming into town. He effectively was a person who brought the ceremony or the celebration to the ceremony, and the museum will open this year. And it is not without a lot of labor of love and a lot of work and a lot of donor support that caused it to be. And so, that is, I mean, the library is a great institutional example of leveraging bricks and mortar and institution for people, but the museum for me is the best icing on the cake that I could have for my portfolio and the work that I've done for the city of Milwaukee. Yeah.
So at the end of the day, what do you hope Bronzeville will be 10 years from now?
We'll say what now? You know, I have a hope for the city of Milwaukee, period. I have 2 black sons, and Milwaukee for the longest has been the worst place for African Americans to live, and it's disgusting to me. And so my hope for Bronzeville is the same hope that I would have for the city, is that it's a way to leverage a particular ethnic group in an effort to bridge sort of this divide that is so prevalent and just real. And that's it. I mean, it's like the Sherman Phoenix, but like scattered out across several blocks. It's like, how do you bring commerce affiliated with a particular, like a Brady Street, but with arts and culture on steroids, is what I would describe Bronzeville as my vision for Bronzeville. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I asked the same question of both Julie and JoAnne. What are your hopes for communities like the Bronzeville neighborhood, but for the city as a whole? What is realistic in terms of, because you do a lot of dreaming about what's possible. What do you think is realistic?
Optimist, you go.
Yeah, I like that word. Julie said you have to be optimistic.
No, I'm not.
She labels me the eternal optimist.
Well, whatever.
So leaning into my
Still a good
optimistic
word.
response.
Yeah.
I don't know, the word that comes up for me is some type of resolution or resolve, and really looking at, and all of the different, my background was really in research, so I categorize every social economic determinant of health, and where can we land along that spectrum? So where is their resolution? Where is their peace for our young black boys? Where are their peace for all of our spirits? So there's this continuum of peace, and I think we found our lane. You can dig in anywhere, but that people make a decision to do something. And so that would be the ultimate hope, that all of this work becomes a catalyst for all of us to make a decision to do something. We're aware. We have, in our respective areas of influence, great opportunity to do something. And so my hope is that all of this continues to be a catalyst for us to say it's time.
And I think I hope that as a community, if we're willing to invest $100 million in one building and one cultural institution, which we've done a couple times in this town, that we think about investing $100 million in multiple buildings because there is enough. There is enough.
There is enough.
And
abundance.
there is abundance. And I also hope that people who look like me, and particularly who are not my gender, but people who are white hear this and own it as our responsibility through our privilege to be the change, because this city has been this way for too long. So I don't want to hope. I want to keep creating opportunities myself in partnership and more for you, so you all, because what we've learned is people want this. They just don't know how to, well, I want that change, but how can I do it? And so creating pathways for all of us to help be part of the change.
I think it's probably not an overstatement to say that the real estate development business has largely been dominated by people who look like me. You know, they look like
just a little bit.
But my question is this: for people who don't look like me, for women, for people of color, what's your advice? How do you become a part of the development world? How do you get there so that you can do the things that change the community?
Oh, I would flip that around, Mike, because I mean, the thing that is most insulting to us on a daily basis is, you know what you should do? I mean, if I could count the number of times that someone has said to my partner, JoAnne, you know what you should do? No, you know what you should do is ask her, how does she do this? How is she, what? So, I mean, absolutely, I could speak to what it's like to become a woman, or we could speak to what it's like to become a person of, we all know, we have to work twice as hard and demonstrate 20 million projects before, like, we're not patronized for it to a certain degree, but I would just flip that around and ask us to be a white male and ask us to help you partner. You have a white male partner. I mean, that's a step towards changing the narrative and changing the impact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky question, and I think there's some practical components of it. So if there are like the fledgling developers out there that really want to get into the industry, and it doesn't even have to be specific to development. Real estate is so vast. You got construction, you got finance, you have accounting, you have architectural design, interior design, property management. People think about development, they're like, I gotta be a developer. Well, not actually. There are so many different ways to contribute to a process and to a development that the possibilities are endless. But cliche and redundant and repetitive comment is, networking is truly a part of that.
How did you get into it?
Yeah, the way I got into it, how much time I got? Long story short there is Marquette came up with this program called ACRE. It stands for the Associates in Commercial Real Estate Program. So I participated in that now 14 years ago. I was very pregnant with baby number 2, and I was working for the Milwaukee Brewers, and I was working for the Department of Corrections, and I said, well, let me try this ACRE thing. It's the story of my life. But I applied for this course, got into the inaugural class, and for me, it changed my perspective in its entirety. So to Julie's point, you don't know how exposing another person to some information will change the trajectory of their individual lives. And so that probably would be the closing remark in terms of how do you get others involved in the industry is be willing to expose someone to the work that you do, because it may spark a light in them, and then provide the support along the way.
JoAnne, I'll give you the final word, and then we'll take some audience questions.
I think the question was...
I think my final word is I concur.
Yay!
Perfect. Absolutely.
All right, we'll take questions, and the way we do this is if you're in the seating bowl, you'll see you have one of these black kind of triangular shaped devices in front of you. Keep your finger down on that. We'll be able to hear your questions. Ryan will try and make sure they're picked up by the microphone. If you're in the back and you have a question, just raise your hand, and Ryan will come over and hold the microphone. Again,
That's a nice
try and limit the speeches. We'll get to as many questions as possible. So raise your hand if you have a question for our guests today. That's amazing. We've covered all of the ground that they possibly, yes, go ahead.
You've spoken so much about the importance of community. Hi, Julie. I'm wondering, what are your backgrounds? Did you all grow up in Milwaukee?
Hales Corner, shout out Southwest Side.
No. I'm born and raised Milwaukee, product of urban Milwaukee specifically.
My family's from here. My mom left in 1969 and moved back and retired. I'm a New Yorker. I grew up in New York, but grew up here. This is where all my family is from, North and 17th Street, so Central City.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Oh, shy. This is a shy bunch of
right
people.
over here, yes, please. Yeah, just hold it down, and Ryan will try and find it on his
Thank
device,
you.
too.
My question is, are there plans for marketing the businesses collectively? I actually represent 95 small businesses on Center Street from 32nd to 60th and Center, and a lot of my small business owners are really looking forward to the project opening, but also wondering about additional opportunities. So I'm wondering, are there opportunities for marketing as well as space?
No more space, but yes, marketing. Marketing always.
Volunteers? What's interesting is we read an article in the paper not long ago that was talking about food halls that are coming to Milwaukee, and it was focusing on what we have and including a description of the Milwaukee public market. And it described how big it was and how many tenants, and we were both like, holy crap. We're like significantly bigger than the Milwaukee public market. When that dawned on us, we started Googling them and reached out to them to mentor us. How do you do it? How do you market that many businesses in one space? And so we're still catching up with what we've created right now. And so some of that is, yes, we will. Join us, community, and help us do that.
And then leaning into your expertise, you're supporting 95 businesses,
Yes.
so we'd love to check in,
Yeah.
for sure.
Other questions? Yes, sir, way in the back. Hang on a second, we'll get you a microphone.
Yes, we're still looking for new investors. Just want to put that out there. That was a question. Donors, yes. Available.
Two questions. One, with the Phoenix, is there any effort to help develop the businesses that are coming in, or is it primarily you rent your space and you do what you got to do? No. Or is it something that's going to be a bit more organic to help develop those businesses and grow so that they become stable? And then second, for Melissa, I know you've been doing this for over a decade. Like, what are the major changes that you've seen in the city's development picture that either help or hurt minorities potentially getting into development?
For a second. Me? Yes, we have a business entrepreneurial support program. We're working with lots of mentors and WIBIC, as well as BizStarts. So we have practical skills, so there's this scaling up need for our folks that are looking at their third location. We're looking at this inception, new startups that require a different level of support and are offering support across the spectrum of need. So access to capital, and there's also this nuanced piece that I've learned is that how are you looking at the whole person when you talk about employability? We have a lot of employees. I think a lot of us across social economic standing deal with a significant amount of trauma. So how do we assess that trauma so we can still be present and still live? What are those tools that are required? So there's a wellness component. So there's these really tangible skills, and then there's this thread of wellness. So for all of my employees, we offer Reiki, acupuncture, and yoga. So really thinking about when this trauma happens, because life happens, how do we create a nurturing place that our employees still want to come to? And so that's my answer.
Yeah, like a two-part question just for me alone. I would say in the 12 years that I've been a developer and 14 years that I've been exposed to real estate, I don't think much has really changed. I think maybe for me personally has gotten a tad bit easier because I don't have the burden of having to prove that I can do it. Now it's like, next question. And so then all the challenges still exist. I mean, everything that we've talked about in terms of exposure to the industry, what it means to have net worth and being able to do transactions, it's all still there. But I will say that my work is an example for somebody who wants to do it. Mm-hmm. And so if there's a lesson in what I've had to endure and persevere through, this is an example, or I'm an example, we're an example of it's hard out here in these streets, but if you're committed to it and you're willing to put in that effort, you can manifest it point blank. And so I don't want to minimize the difficulty of it. I mean, it's beautiful to like reflect back and say, oh, I did 75 million worth of deals and I have over 400 units in my portfolio, but it misses a lot of the story of the trials and tribulations, personal, professional, and community-wide that allowed it to occur.
Other questions? Yeah, Chip.
Another two-parter. The first one is Julie calls out, but she's got to actually ID how we get involved because she's got us all wetted with an appetite for getting involved. So she actually,
It's on me now is what you're saying.
Yeah,
Oh,
you'll,
right.
yeah. So tell us how. Then the second question is, you created this hunger. How do you train people to be you so they create more of it? Because the best way to feed someone, right, is to teach them to fish. So how are you taking these efforts and training other people to do them so this spreads faster?
I'll speak quickly to that. In terms of your access to opportunity, we have, reach out through my website. We have 2 current projects that are accepting minimum of $1,000 investors. So if investment is a way you'd like to get involved, fixdevelopment.com is the website, and you can access the Sherman Phoenix through that way, or send an email to me and become an owner in the Sherman Phoenix or in a hostel project I'm working on in River West, for an example, or reach out to my partners who are also seeking capital for projects. So if that's an on-ramp, but for everybody that's not the way they want to participate, we have volunteer opportunities as another way. In terms of sort of scaling this, teaching someone to fish, in every one of my projects, I only proceed as a co-developer model. So on every project, there is a JoAnne or a Jeremy or another person who I am partnering with to have translation of skills. I gain so much by watching her brilliance and expertise, and then hopefully she's learning by walking the walk of doing a development. It's not that it's intellectually impossible, it's that you just gotta do one before you see the sausage and how it's made. So if any of you have a real estate deal, I'm retiring, but these 2 lovely ladies would love to partner with you potentially. But seriously, that's what happens after these talks is we get contacted by a bunch of people who might know of a building on their block, and we're very open to having that dialogue. We're creating some case studies of the work. But the other piece I would say is it's impossible to scale when you're doing it at that micro level. We have to ask for the same number of people to do a $300,000 deal that we have to do for a $3 million deal, and there's only so many of you in Milwaukee. So why don't we set up $100 million to replicate these projects? Because we could do more than one at a time. It's just that we can't raise that much money all at the same time. So help us think about how to channel resources in a scalable way is another way you could be helpful.
You're not retiring, are you?
I just need a little vacation.
Okay. For very brief.
I can't retire. I live in River West. I have a mortgage.
Other questions? Yes. We'll get it.
Hi, Marcia.
You started out by saying that your purpose, one of your purposes is to create joy, and you have created so much joy in this room. I feel so proud of all of you, and Mike, you too, for having these women here. It's just great to have you all. And just one more.
Only as good as your guests, Marcia. Only as good as your guests.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, you can't. I don't think you can do better than this, Mike. They're just fantastic. Anyway, I'm an investor in a couple of Julie's projects, and there is great joy when I'm sitting in the Tandem restaurant eating that gorgeous chicken, and I could say to people, I'm an owner of this place. I'm a little owner, just itty-bitty owner, but I'm an owner nonetheless, and there is great joy in that.
Thank you, Marcia. One other way you can get involved, Marcia made me think of this. One of the ways I know Marcia is through professionally, but also there's a group in Milwaukee that's all volunteer-based, and it's called Fond Milwaukee, and it's something I founded about 10 years ago because I was so frustrated with the lack of access to capital to small businesses. Namely, at that time when I started, it was Purple Door Ice Cream who was making ice cream in their kitchen and wanted to scale, and that's the type of business who doesn't get access to bank financing for their little ice cream idea. And we founded this group called Fund Milwaukee. If you Google it, Fund Milwaukee, I think it's .com. We have meetings once a month typically, and small businesses, like all the ones we've been talking about, pitch and look for folks like you to decide, would you like to invest in the Tandem restaurant? Or I pitch my real estate there, would you like to invest? So it's an opportunity to bring your business ideas to a group of potential average folks who'd like to invest, or vice versa, to invest back into all kinds of businesses across Milwaukee. So check out Fund Milwaukee to get more involved.
It was a great foundation for the Juice Kitchen, and now that's how we grow, is through personal investors. So investors will now come to us and fund the shindig, and then we have interpersonal promissory notes, and we pay them back versus going to larger lenders. So I see
old school.
Some of our Juice Kitchen founding funders that invested and allowed us to get started in the room.
Mm-hmm. Time for a question or two. Yes.
So you've talked a lot about raising capital to make all of this happen, and you keep talking about developing a fund. Can you tell our audience, who then can go tell 10 people they know, who can tell 10 people they know, until 1 million people know it? How do you envision a fund like that to get started?
That's a good question.
Because we're so busy doing it, we haven't, I mean, really, I think it's like a cohort of helpful people who can help us put that deal together. Real estate funds exist. They're just not focused on this kind of strategy. So I think it would be a think tank of smart people who have the time and capacity to help form that. But I think it's modeling in some ways after funds exist, but not entirely, because we all know that traditional financial systems aren't set up to work this way. So we are going to have to innovate through some of that. Part of my inability to get that idea lift is just overwhelmed with trying to do the deals in front of me all the time. So there are smart financial people in the room. Part of the problem with us in real estate, I think, is we typically turn to people who we think know our business. They're sometimes the worst people. So sometimes turning to financial funder people is the worst thing too, because they only think about the way they do it now, and it's got to be something different. Lower return, maybe. More sustainable return, maybe. That's the way I like to call it, is a sustainable return. Double-digit returns benefit a few and not all, and can we find a sustainable return for a fund that helps everybody in the relationship of the deal? Thanks, Margaret.
Time for one more question or so? Yes, sir?
Hi. I know there's several students in the room. For individuals who are interested in getting involved but really don't have the financial capital to invest or donate, what are some other ways to get involved and help?
I would say volunteer. And again, there's this sense of you have a large network. So sharing the word, that's a critical piece, is leveraging your networks.
And then patronizing the businesses. They would appreciate to see the face of every single person in here. The museum would benefit from it, the Juice Kitchen would benefit from it, and every single business that operates out of the Sherman Phoenix will benefit from you all patronizing and having your friends and family also patronize.
That's the best answer. Be with us.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Final question? All right, we'll wrap it up there.
Well, you got one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Ryan's getting a good workout today, so.
I think I can speak loud enough.
Just.
Okay, you're here.
There you go, thanks.
How do we move this type of investment to other areas of Milwaukee that are not getting the attention or the support to build on their areas? My community is in the northwest, Old North Milwaukee neighborhood, and we don't have much support in finance, in terms of growing businesses. And I see the entrepreneurial support that you guys give and training, education. I'd like to model that in our community. Can you help me in terms of?
Just out of curiosity, what is like the intersection for that neighborhood?
It's on the east, it's Teutonia, and 42nd Street on the west, and that's between Silver Spring, and to the south of that, I believe it ends about Congress.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
You got to be the change, by the way. I mean, one thing I will say is that on my website, fixeddevelopment.com, we have case studies of all the projects we've done, and they're downloadable. And you might just want to read some of those just to say, okay, I mean, I was a community activist that became I use the term real estate developer because people understand or think they do what that means, but I'm really just trying to make Milwaukee a better place, using real estate as a tool. Look at some of those case studies and be like, oh yeah, I can do step 1, 2, 3, 4, and start to build a building block, because it's got to be us. There is no other they coming with the saving.
I would do the same. I would say that my work started at Walnut Way Conservation Corp as a good case study to say how neighbors made the decision So there wasn't a spotlight on 17th and North. When we moved there, there were bullets and there were anything that you could imagine that fell under the auspices of disenfranchised, all those terms, that was our neighborhood. So understand not having the spotlight or the resources, that's from where this work came from. So I would say that Walnut Way and the history of the Lindsay Heights community would be a good point of grounding and how do you galvanize neighbors to do something.
Yeah, everything that I've ever done is Northside Milwaukee. And so whether it's 53206, 12, 24, and so the case studies definitely absolutely exist for how do you do urban renewal in urban communities. So I think the examples out there, I think specific to your neighborhood, I would say that Haven Woods, I think might be by you, or Northwest Side, CDC. I think about the Villard Library that was redone. And so tapping into some of the economic development organizations that exist specific to your community. Also even reaching out to the city of Milwaukee, touching base with folks who do like the business improvement districts near you would also be a good resource. And then just looking into organizations that do that type of work. And so you can create like a mini sort of resource guide based on the organizations that do serve smaller businesses. And you got a resource right in the room, the Center Street Business Improvement District. And so it really, there's no easy one-step answer. It's like this multifaceted approach you got to take to get the information that you need.
I'm going to wrap things up there. I want to thank everybody for coming today, for your interest, your attention. Good. We are always delighted to have you join us here at the law school. We hope you will again in the future. And before we go, let's say a special thank you again to Juli Kaufmann, JoAnne Sabir, and Melissa Goins. Thank you very much.